Hi, and welcome back to Meet Bridget. This is a show that sheds light on the often untold teenage and young adult stories of successful women from all types of backgrounds and in all sorts of careers. This show is an extension of our confidence coaching service for young women. I'm Asha Gabriel, and I co host this show alongside my best friend and our Meet Bridget COO, Kashia Rosenberg. This is season 4 of Meet Bridget, and today I'm so excited for you to meet Michelle Barto. Michelle is a mother of 4, a business owner, and a current Newport Mesa Unified School District trustee. For those of you who are in other cities and states, Newport Mesa is the school district in the region right around where I live and where we live in Newport Beach, California. Michelle sits on the board of Pretend City Children's Museum, Coastline ROP, Orange County School Boards Association, Harbor Council PTA, the National Charity League Newport chapter, and Balboa Bay Club Board of Governors. She also volunteers along with her children at Assistance League of Newport Mesa, Project Hope Alliance, and Someone Cares Soup Kitchen. She has a bachelor's in business administration and in computer information science from Franciscan University of Steubenville. Michelle runs Launch Creative LLC, which is a digital marketing firm focused on helping mission driven companies and nonprofits grow their brands and leave the world just a little bit better than they found it. An avid reader, runner, and former college soccer player, Michelle loves surfing, skiing, and hiking with her family. Michelle's children, aged 12 to 16, along with her husband, Brady, are her source of inspiration. A lifelong resident of the Newport Mesa community, she hopes to keep contributing to this special place we call home for years to come. Michelle is also running for our city council here in Newport, and I have met her through multiple people, and I've just been so impressed by how much she is doing for our community, but also balancing at home. I've got 2 little ones at home, and I can only imagine having that workload doubled. So, Michelle, I'm thrilled to have you here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on the podcast.
Well, as you might know, we love to jump right into your younger years. Obviously, you have this super impressive bio, but I love just going straight back to the beginning and where it started for you, what kind of child you were. Obviously, we mentioned in your bio that you grew up here. So paint the picture a little bit about your family life and what you were like as a little girl.
I'm the oldest of 4 kids myself. My siblings are between, let's see, 4 years, 8 years, and almost 11 years younger than I am. So there's a bit of a gap. So I feel like I came into that oldest sister role kind of organically and helped run the show. And my siblings definitely thought I was a little bit too bossy when we were growing up. I've got 2 sisters and a brother, and we're still really, really close. My parents still live in the same house that I grew up in over in Costa Mesa. My grandmother was very much a part of my life, especially my early years. My mom was a working mom through about age 5, I guess, for me. And so my grandmother was my primary caregiver during those years. Like, I'm half Mexican, so I learned through my grandmother, we learned Spanish. And so I probably picked that up almost as well as English, although I've forgotten and ended up taking it in school. But what's interesting is when my grandparents came to the United States, and they were both born here, and then they moved back to Mexico in the 30s. And then they came back in the 1940s and met each other and got married and stayed. When they were raising their kids, it was really uncommon for people to teach kids Spanish. They wanted to assimilate to the culture. So my aunts and uncles and my mom didn't learn Spanish from their parents. They learned it in school and just from life and living in Southern California. But times changed. My grandmother, when she was helping look after me, we spoke a lot of Spanish together. So that's kind of a fun fact. I have a lot of songs in my earliest memories in Spanish that I can, if I can't remember a word, I'm like, oh, I know the song. I'll go back and like figure out the word from that song. Grew up and I did ballet for pretty much through age 14, I guess. And then I'd always wanted to play soccer, but my grandma was very old fashioned. And so she felt like girls shouldn't play sports. So dance was the option. But as as I got a little bit older and had a little bit more autonomy, I went and signed myself up for a soccer club in high school, and thought it would be a much more terrifying experience than it was. I hadn't ever played soccer before, but all that dance served me in good stead because,
Oh,
body
yeah.
movement and moving your feet. But yeah,
Right.
so I worked really hard for those 4 years and went to college and was able to play D3 soccer as like spent the first 3 years on the bench, but by my fourth year, I actually got to play in a lot of games. And that was like a really big deal for me because it was something I always wanted to do. So I love soccer. I played after college as long as I could. And then I think after there was a day where I was like taking timeouts to go, with my fourth kid, was taking timeouts to go breastfeed during timeouts. I'm like, "Ah, I think this is the end of the road for me. I think those days are
The long
past." So
road, though. That's awesome.
yeah. So I still love it. And I coach a lot of my kids' teams, and it's just something that I really enjoy. I spent a lot of time reading as a kid because as the oldest of such lots of siblings, but they're really different ages. And so kind of with my having my grandma around as much as she needed a lot of help. And so I took a lot of my parents' time helping her. So I had a lot of time in my parents' backyard. So I pretty avid reader, or sorry, you'd find me in a tree reading a book a lot of the times. I loved just like playing in my backyard and making things. And my family's also very artistic. I'm probably the least artistic of my actual family because a couple of them are actual artists. But I love kind of crafting and creating and making things beautiful. A lot of that came from my early childhood, just having the time to. There's a lot of free time. I look at my kids now and like it's just a different. I try to give them as much free time as they want, but things are just like busier than they were when I was growing up.
It's so interesting. I love the multicultural background, and I think it's really interesting to hear about, people's siblings, but then also, like, the age differences and birth order. It all really plays a factor into, the roles we end up assuming into really our adulthood and beyond. I think that, like, oldest sister role is really buzzy right now. Everyone's talking about, like, kind of the weight of being that eldest sister. Did you feel like even though there was a gap between you and your siblings, did you feel like you had to kinda be like the second parent in some ways, or at least setting like an example, or being held to like a standard of behavior that was a little bit more loaded than your siblings?
Yeah, I definitely did. My sister, when she was going to try to decide where to go to high school when she was in eighth grade, so this is quite a bit later. Well, an important thing too is when I was in ninth grade, 2 weeks before I entered ninth grade, my mom made a big decision to homeschool all the four of us, like about 2 weeks before high school started. So that was a really big deal because it was unexpected and definitely a challenging part of my life because I had a lot of friends and it's very social. And we can talk about like some of that later. But what was interesting was I found through that, I'd always, I was changing my brother's diapers since I was 10 and I was like guiding them and, cooking them a lot of meals when my mom would be helping my grandma. So I was like prep cooking and doing laundry since I was probably 8 or 10 years old. But she was trying to decide where to go to high school. And so and my mom was unfamiliar with OSHA, and my sister went to Orange County High School of the Arts for opera, was her like major
Wow.
that they have them do. And I remember helping her with her applications, and I drove her there to her interview and really took a lot of time to just kind of guide her through that process. So I definitely was when I came time to get married and have kids, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to have kids just because I had felt like I'd already raised children and knew how great it was, but like knew how much work went into it. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know if I can do that a second time. And then I ended up getting pregnant. And then I'm like, all right, well, we're just gonna go for it. We're gonna have four and it'll be fun. And the nice thing is I think I have the confidence with raising my own kids just because I have had kind of a trial and error process with, helping with my siblings so much and helping bring them up.
It's so interesting. I feel like, as someone with 4 kids, I wouldn't have expected to hear that you were like, at one point, you're like, "Should I even do this?" Because I've kind of had this role already, but clearly, I mean, looking at you from the outside in, it's like you're a mom of 4 and you're also so involved not only in your own kids' activities and education, but also in the education of the entire school district at this point. I'm really interested to hear more about that, like your mom's homeschooling decision. Looking at it now, maybe what you think fueled that decision, and then how long you guys were homeschooled after that. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, those feelings and everything? Because that must have
Yeah.
been a really big transition for a young kid.
Yeah, so at the time, I didn't really get it, but in retrospect, I think I have a good understanding. She like I said, she had to help a lot with my grandma, and I think my dad had just left a job that he was unhappy at, and so she was looking at the tuition for the private high school coming up. She was looking at the fact that she had 4 kids. The school I was gonna go to was in Rosary High School, so that's quite a drive from here, and then my sibling who were in elementary school, 2 of them were in it was in Huntington Beach. So I think she was looking at her mornings and going, you know, 25-minute drive one direction and then another 20-minute drive this direction. And then my brother was going into pre-K, I believe. And so he would have been at the school right by us. So I think practically she kind of looked at and was just overwhelmed by the amount of driving that she was going to have to do herself to get all these kids to and from. And then I think financially, she was kind of overwhelmed by the thought of how expensive that was all going to be, not knowing when my dad would, find a job that he was happier in. So I think I think she just felt like, I want a conservative education for my children. She went to public school in the 60s, and the school that she went to is now like a phenomenal high school. But at the time, they were doing a lot of like experimental like programs, like they didn't take attendance kind of thing. Like, and she didn't have great teachers. So her experience with the public, so in many ways, I think she really struggled when I decided to send my kids to public school. But her experience with public school was so terrible because of just the time and just, the 60s was weird. So she I think she just thought, well, I feel like I can figure this out a little bit better for everyone and provide like we're Catholic, so provide like a solid Catholic education and provide a challenging curriculum in a way that maybe she hadn't experienced in public school. I didn't feel that way. I really wanted to go to Newport Harbor High School. So I walked over to Newport Harbor after I found out we were going to be homeschooled and asked for the application, and they gave it to me. And they're like, oh, yeah, but you just need a parent signature. I'm like, well, that's not gonna happen, so I have to figure out something else. This was the early or, like, the mid yeah, it was, like, 1995. Yeah, it's 1995, so there weren't a lot of people homeschooling back then, but she found a, like, Catholic homeschooling, like, community that had I mean, a lot they had a it sounds bigger, that it probably was, like, 40 families, but those 40 families comprised about, like, 2 or 300 kids just because everyone had so many children, but that was going from kindergarten through 12th grade, all those kids, and so it was interesting because we were able to get together, weekly with some of the other kids, and I ended up starting a student council among the high school kids. It was a pretty small group. I think my graduating class was like 3, but the, other I think total high school kids were probably maybe 25, somewhere around there. So we started student council. I put on a musical. I produced a play at one of the local elementary schools. They let us use their theater. So we produced a play that I wrote and directed and choreographed because all that dance experience. That was when I was I think a sophomore. Just had like the best time and got to explore a lot of things I maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. I try to look for all of those. Like it was really hard for me to leave. Like a lot of my friends were going to high school where I was going to go to high school, so that was hard to leave that. But there are a lot of really wonderful things that I wouldn't have had the chance to do. So that was really good. And then through freshman year and sophomore year, homeschool pretty much consisted of me, studying at home, getting some tutoring with in areas that I found challenging, and then meeting with the group for we had Latin and Greek once a week. After in sophomore year, the science was harder than pretty much I knew I couldn't just like do that on my own, plus of labs and everything. So I ended up taking the California high school proficiency exam and enrolling at Orange Coast College, the local community college, pretty much full time. I got a job at the library, and so I was working. So that was when I was 15, and like shortly after I turned 16, I got a job at the library. So I was working there 30 hours a week, and I was taking, full like 12 credits at the community college, and then completing the homeschool like work that my mom wanted me to do. So religion and Latin and things like and playing soccer. And I look back and I kind of can't believe like how much I did and how tired I must have been. But then it just prepares you for life, because like then you can juggle all those things and you can do it kind of fine. what works and what inspires you to keep going. So I did that for the last 2 years of high school, and then was really great because I took so many credits. I went into when I was deciding where to go to college, the place I ultimately chose took all of the credits that I accumulated at Orange Coast College, fully accepted them. So I went into my freshman year of a 4-year college as a second semester junior.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. And so I was able to have a car from like day one, which was great because it was in Ohio and it was so cold that it was really awesome to have the ability to drive to class and not have to always walk up. I joke that like that school, you can truly say that you walk uphill through the snow both ways because when the dorms were on one hill and the classes were on the other, and you have to walk up and it would get sometimes really like -15 with wind chill. It was
Oof.
just nice to be able, yeah. So it was nice to be able to drive when I could.
Yeah.
I appreciated that.
I love hearing about your homeschool experience because I think that someone that hasn't, really explored that world or seen how many different ways it can be done might assume that like homeschooling literally means that your mom is sitting there with workbooks and you're just at home all day long and you're not connected with anyone except your family. But I think there are a lot of really amazing homeschool communities where it's like you do have this, weekly or even more
Yeah.
frequent check in with the other students and you have this kind of community and socialization also. And it's so fun to hear about, from such an early age, you just have been so community minded and a leader to be able to like put together a musical and like find your community. I'm sure it was really hard to have that transition out of like, the comfort zone of your
Yeah.
friends that you were like supposed to be moving, through the grades with. But then you can also say like, maybe having that in an early age really hone those skills of like, all right, like I'm in a new setting, like the community isn't clear, so I'm gonna like get scrappy and make it myself and to be able to manage, the basically college workload and a job and soccer all at the same time is really, really impressive. But
Oh,
speaks
thank
to
you.
like a lot about your personality, that it seems like you're really curious and you were seeking out those kind of like leadership opportunities from a really early age.
Thank you. Yeah, I love people. I always joke that like I'm the golden retriever. Like I'm quiet. I don't like being center of attention, but like I need people from center of.
Yeah,
So if there's something to do and people are doing it, I'm like, I'll go. I want to be there.
that's awesome. I'm so interested about, like, why did you pick school in Ohio, or how did that happen?
There's like serious answers and like a funny answer too. So the funny answer is I got into USC and Claremont McKenna. Those were my two top schools, and I was really excited to go there. And my mom said, "This is so great. I'm going to come visit you every weekend, and we can hang out all weekend long." And I knew that she would, so I was like, "I've been home for more than you
Yeah,
normally get your high school kids. I need to like get out." So obviously, you don't just make decisions because of things like that, but the other answer is with a computer science degree that I really wanted to study abroad, and there's just not a lot of opportunities to do so, even though going in, I probably could have done that and then taken a gap year. At the time, I was like, I want to study abroad as part of college. I want a normal 4-year experience. That's why I added a second major because I had the time. And then studying abroad, it's really hard usually with computer science. You can only go to English speaking countries, and they often don't take the stuff doesn't transfer. But this college has a campus in Austria where the teachers from the school will go and take like 5-year rotations, and they'll go live there with their families for 5 years and teach the same classes that you'd have back in Ohio.
cool.
And it was really awesome because we lived in a 12th century monastery.
Wow.
Um, and all the computers were in the basement. So we were like programming where all these like monks had lived, 900 years before. It was pretty cool experience. And the other one was, again, I really wanted to play soccer in college. And it was not, it's not like I was coming in with loads of experience as the best athlete. They would take me to play soccer on the team. And, it was far. I wanted to get out of the bubble of Newport Beach a little bit. It was
Yeah,
good.
that's so cool. How long were you in Austria when you studied abroad?
A semester and then a month after that. So probably around 7 months.
So cool. It is gorgeous there. I feel
Oh,
like I was supposed to go. I played violin in, like, elementary school and through middle school, and we had this, like, school trip. We were going to go to Austria and, like, play with our orchestra there, which was I was so excited because I really liked Mozart as a kid. kind of dweeby like that. But
Oh, no, it's
yes,
such a that's great. That's awesome.
I was like, "Oh, the music capital of the world."
Yeah.
And, the year we were supposed to go, 9/11 happened and
Mm.
everything kinda got canceled. So I got to go as an adult, and it is just, like, such a beautiful place. I mean, the scenery and the mountains and everything, but also the culture is really interesting and beautiful and history.
I loved it, and then the people were so nice, and, when I was there actually in 2001, so but it was the first half of that year, so things were pretty different, but the people were so welcoming, and then when it was springtime, like, watching you felt like you were in The Sound of Music, like,
Yes.
every day. Like, "Here's the hills, and
Yeah, it was
here's the
gorgeous.
flowers."
So
Mhm.
nice. So, when you were in college or even before that, I mean, you were doing all these things to be involved in school, your community, your sports team. Did you have an idea then of kind of what you wanted to do with your career or your future? What was kind of in your head at the time?
So I think it's so cool, like we talk about in the education world about how we're preparing kindergartners for careers that don't even exist yet.
Mhm.
And that definitely applied to me because I always knew I wanted to run a business of some sort that was just like I started a lemonade stand when I was super young and I would sell bracelets and I was always just enjoying like I enjoyed being entrepreneurial and I figured that I would go into business consulting, but I really remember liking a couple of the computer classes that I had in elementary school. And I didn't really know how that would all go together because I love doing art. I wouldn't say I'm an artist, but I love doing like creative kind of work and I love dealing with people and I loved programming. And I didn't know how that all fit together. So I thought maybe business consulting would be a good fit. And that was my first job out of college. I did that for 5 years and loved it. It was like such a fun job. But web design and graphic, like all of that is actually all the things that I love to do because it's working with people and then designing graphically and then getting in there with the code. And I get to do all of those things on a daily basis. And it's so much fun because when I was 16 years old, being a web designer was not it was like a nascent job. It wasn't like a real like job or career. It's pretty great that that's what it turned out to be.
I think that's such a good point, and I like hearing your perspective, from what the work that you do with the school board because it's so true. I mean, I think that the girls that we work with in our coaching, for so many of them, like, the career paths they're less delineated. I remember, like, in college, someone like, we'd go through these books of, like, careers and the
Yeah.
job descriptions, and it was so strange to me because I was like, there's just a disconnect with, like, trying to see these career paths on a page or on, a website where you're applying and stuff, and I'm like, they're just they feel so static in a world that's so changing.
Yeah.
Especially with just the connectivity of the internet and, the power of, a website and what that can do or social media for a business. It's such an important point because for those that might not feel like, "Okay, I'm not finding a career path that seems like,
Yeah.
boom, there's the fit. I'll just put the pieces of the puzzle together and, like, I'm good for the rest of my life." It's a good point because it's like the world is always changing. If you're not identifying the career or the job that seems quite right for you, you can also make it in this world.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool, and web design now, it's like to be in that state and you're like, "This design is kinda interesting to me," and now web design is like a massive industry.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
just goes to show you that it's like if you're feeling confused or, like, not quite a fit at that age, don't think that the world isn't gonna be changing and adapting to those feelings that you're having.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I was talking to a girl she's working on her fellowship this summer and she's going to law school in the fall and she's going to be a space lawyer. Like that sounds like a fake job, but that's
I'm a space lawyer.
yeah.
That totally is, I mean, real. It's a re that's
Yeah.
I mean, if anywhere needs law, it's probably space in these
Yeah.
years as we come up, right? I love that. So tell us a little bit about so you went into business consulting for someone who has no idea what that is. How did you get that position, and what was your day-to-day like? You said you were doing that for about 5 years out of
Yeah.
college?
So the part of business consulting can be anything. The part of consulting that I did was for purchasing. And so I would work with large companies to renegotiate their contracts for items that they purchased. And anything from like copiers to office supplies, sometimes temporary employee contract. Sounds kind of boring, but it was actually, I thought it was really fun because you have to figure out how to be the most efficient with all of these resources and how to get creative. If you've got two companies that maybe want to work with this office supplies vendor, how you can say like, hey, you guys can band together and that will save you money because now that volume of orders is that much bigger that's coming in business. When I was in college and trying to decide if I was going to take a computer science degree, I could have probably graduated with a business degree at 19 because I had so many credits, but I looked really young for my age. And I thought, oh, you can't go to a CEO when you look like you're 12 and say, this is how you should run your
Yeah.
business. Then it was good working there, just being just a little bit older. And I would meet with CEOs and I present all the documentation on how or what our recommendations would be, how we were renegotiating their contracts. And the thing that I liked is a lot of times as a consultant, you'll go in, make these recommendations, put this big binder on their desk and then leave. And then what we offered as a service was maintaining that relationship with that client for the next few years, as long as they wanted to continue to use our services, which I liked because it felt like we were not only proof of concept, but just being that much more um, providing that customer support in a meaningful way. And whatever I'm doing, I always want to make sure that people are feeling like the solution we provided is a long-term solution. We don't want to just, some of my clients now I've had for 10 years just because I love continuing to provide and build a good relationship with their clients. But I traveled like 75% of the time. So I would go on Monday, I would leave to Dallas, and then I'd probably go to Pennsylvania, come back via South Dakota or Indiana, just depending, and then come back on Friday. And it was so much fun. But then when a couple things happened, I was 25 and I remember, and I was married, I'd been married a couple of years and my husband didn't love that I was gone so much, but I just felt like it was very glamorous and exciting to, be in a new city all the time and try all these different restaurants. And I've been to 49 states because of that.
Wow.
I'm going to hit the 50th one this summer, but that was so much fun for me. Yeah, I think that there's an older sister meme of like being in the airport and you're thriving. Like that was like completely me back then. I was
Yeah.
like living my best life. But I remember I walked into an airport, it was probably could have been Atlanta. I don't even remember which airport. And I dropped off my rental car, walked in, and I smelled this like stale Cinnabon airport smell. And I went, feels like home. And I went, that's bad. Like
Problematic.
I
Freaking live
when
home.
this when the scent of home and stale Cinnabon at 25, you're like, I think something's got to change. So we decided we would, maybe have kids. And the first time we tried, we were having a kid. So that kind of sealed that one. And I was gonna stay because they offered me the opportunity to just continue working for them without travel. And while I was on maternity leave, I came back and I was back for about 2 weeks. And they said, well, good news, you got a promotion. And it was the one that I really wanted, the project manager job that I really wanted that for the 5 years that I was there and had been working towards. And they're like, so good news, you got it. I was like so excited, and they're like, the bad news is like, you're not going to be able to maintain just local clients. We need you to take back that, that East Coast route that you had, region you had before. I couldn't do.
Yeah.
There's no way that I wanted to be gone that much from my baby. And I knew people who were doing it, who were, FedExing home breast milk and I didn't want to do that. So, I was home about 6 months figuring out what my next act would be. I started like a yoga clothing business and that wasn't the right thing, but I liked apparel. And so I was like, maybe I want to do nursing bras because there weren't cute nursing bras back
Yeah.
then. They were pretty functional. So I got my lactation certification as a lactation educator consultant so that I would know if I'm creating these products that they're not going to cause, mastitis or something bad for people. And then I created a line of sexy nursing bras and it was really fun. But I created my own website as part of that and did that for 4 or 5 years and did websites here and there for people as well, just because I liked the website part of it. And I liked working and it was pretty flexible with, having kids. But then I got to my fourth kiddo and I remember being on the phone. I didn't answer the phones. Like primarily we have an answering service that would do all that. But if it got particularly challenging trying to help someone, they would patch them through to me as that backup. And I was changing my youngest diaper and a call came through, and I say, like, same thing, one of those moments where you're like, the time is done. Because I was trying to help this woman figure out appropriate sizing for a nursing bra. She was extremely teeny. I think she was like a 32, but like a 32G. So that figuring out like what size would be appropriate for her was just and not cause any problems was beyond the scope of what my team could do. And I just thought, I didn't take this to like have to divide my time from my kids this way. I did this because I wanted to be able to be more present. So sold all of the patterns and the rights in the business and just kept the website part of things. And the business kind of grew as the kids did. As I had more time, I would do more websites and add more services. And we're here today. So it's been fun.
I think that's so interesting how, I mean, obviously you've been entrepreneurial from a young age, but in the process of like starting a business, sort of you weeded out that it's like, okay, the part of this that's most enjoyable for me and most sustainable for me with the lifestyle I want is that original web part, that you
Right.
firsthand. So it's like as someone who is a web designer, you've been in the shoes of your client in a sense because you've done the web design for your own company and you've had that
Yep.
experience of like, what does my website need to function as an entrepreneur? So,
Yeah.
as you've been going along, you mentioned that, you were married for a couple years by the time you were 25. So you got married pretty early, around, were you 23 when?
23. Yeah.
Okay, tell me
23.
about like when you met your husband because I mean in today's trends and everything is it's on the earlier side. Tell me about how you guys met and how that kind of impacted your journey.
So I met my husband when I was home for the summer from college between the summer of my junior and my senior year. A lot of my friends were doing internships. So a lot of my home friends that I grew up with, like my one of my best friends is someone I've known since I was 2 and 3. A lot of my friends are like lifelong friends from growing up here. But all of my friends were either like in Europe for vacation or they had an internship at another place. And it was just kind of me. And it was funny because my mom was like, "You are hanging around the house." So for someone who wanted me around so much,
Yeah.
she was like, "You're hanging around the house so much." She's like, "You don't have any friends. Like you need to go make some friends." And so she said, "Go to this. There's this church group. They're having the church are starting this young adult group. You should go." And I was like, Okay, I'll go. I'm only going to go once,
Yeah.
and it doesn't sound like my thing, but I'll go." Well, it just so happened my husband went that same night too, and both of us had never gone before. And it was like 4 people in the room, 3 people in the room, and the minute just like I sat down across from my husband, I was like, "Ugh, like, I can already tell I'm gonna really like him." And I dated this guy long distance the year before for like a year, and I was throughout college, I'd had like not long relationships, but maybe like 5 or 6 months, but just like one person. And I was like, as my senior year, I'm just gonna date like casually and date a lot of people, and I'm just gonna have fun, and I'm not gonna worry about like the boyfriend or anything like that. I'm definitely not gonna do long distance relationships. Like never again. That was the worst. So I meet my husband and I was like, I really should not talk to him because I can tell that I will
Yeah.
really like him and I don't want to do this again. So he followed me out of the thing. He's like, "Hey, you guys like," he asked a few people, he's like, "Do you want to go get like coffee or something?" And he was talking to me, but he was also kind of general. And I was like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I've got an interview for this job and it's like, you know, tomorrow and I just need to go make sure my resume is polished up. So I'm going to go do that right now." And he was like, "Okay." And then there was a party. He's like, "Well, we're going to be at the party that we planned with this group." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'll be there." So I went to the party and he like, kind of followed me around and we were talking to each other. And like, we just had so much in common, like from the second we met. And again, I was like, "No, this is not the plan. The plan is to not date somebody long distance, especially not somebody I really like." Like, that's
Yeah.
not the plan. And so at the end, he was like, "Oh, like, do you want to go get some dinner?" And I was like, "I know, I gotta, it's something stupid. Like, I gotta go wash my hair or something like lame like that." He's like, "Can I please at least get," and this was like back when we had like instant messenger. So he's like,
Yeah.
"Can I get your screen name?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll give you my screen name. No harm in that." So we talked on instant messenger like constantly for like 2 weeks. And then he went on vacation with his family. And while I had on instant messenger, I'd recommended a couple books that I thought were like that I just read that I thought were so great. So he bought them and came back and was like, madly in love with me because of all these books. And he's like, oh, because like I think he was just like, we think so similarly.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but he then like he was like, I really want to go on a real date with you. And I was like, okay, well, you have to answer a riddle. And he's like, okay. And I was like, okay, the Ides of March was this emperor's fateful day, but another Ides is my birthday. And without like skipping a beat, he goes, July 15th. And I'm like, all right, like we communicate well enough that this long distance thing might actually work. Okay, I'll go out with you. We're supposed to go on our first date was like really great. It was on a Duffy and everything like that. But before then, Mexico was playing versus USA and they were showing it at the Harp Inn. So it was like not a date because it was a couple days before our first official date. But he's like, do you want to go right now at 11 o'clock at night and watch Mexico versus USA? And I was like, yeah, this is like, let's
Yeah.
do it. Let's go, and we did. I think I turned 21 like the day before or something like that. So just barely able to like go there. And then we went on our first date. That was super fun. And then the second date, he took me to the Laguna Beach Art Museum and to walk along Inspiration Point. And pretty much like that date, we both kind of knew like we're in it for the long haul. We're probably getting married someday. And that's what it felt like to me. And I guess it also felt like that to him because when he proposed, he recreated that second date and proposed that way. So that was pretty fun.
That's so sweet. I feel like that it tends to happen with a lot of people where it's like and that was the case for me too, where it's when you're in that headspace of like, I'm gonna do anything but date right now. I am not focused on
Yeah.
this. I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna be casual. I'm gonna just be, not doing this like relationship thing
Yeah.
again right away. And
Yeah.
something about that headspace, I also feel like unintentionally being a little standoffish from a
Hmm.
guy that, like, sometimes makes them really like, if they're interested, they really hone in on it.
Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
extra bit of resistance, like, "Are you sure?" Uh,
Yeah.
but it's so sweet, and it seems like you guys just really had, a lot in common, and for you to have met at, that youth church group, it says, I feel like those meetings when you're at something that's like, okay, a mutual interest or value or community does kind of make a nice, foundation for relationships or even just friendships that are based in shared values and that
Right, because right
that's
off the bat, you've got a certain amount of things in common that are meaningful.
so cool. Okay, so I feel like we went from like the first time you got pregnant to like you having your fourth child pretty quickly, but your kids are you said like between 12 and 16 right now, right?
Yeah, yeah, I had
You
four
did
kids
have
in
them
4
pretty
years.
close
Yeah,
together, and that's interesting because you growing up, you were one of 4, but you were spread out pretty significantly. When you
yeah.
started having kids, did you intentionally want them to be closer in age than you were with your siblings, or did it just kind of happen that way?
No, I definitely did. I wanted to have them as close together as I possibly could because I felt like having siblings my husband's one of 5, and, like, watching them together, they're closer in age, not as close as my kids, but closer in age than my siblings were. They had so much fun together, like, they had built in, like, friends all the time, and so I was like, "All right, we're gonna go through this, like, let's just go through the, like, as quickly as we possibly can," because the diapers, all of that is just so tiring and just
Yeah.
so exhausting. Those days are so long, and I remembered that from growing up, and I was just like, "I cannot imagine having kids in diapers for, like, 12 or 15 years, like,
Yeah.
that would be awful, so let's just get through that, and, I'm so glad we did, and now in high school, it's a little bit, like, overwhelming because there's so many places for them to be all at the same time, but it's also really awesome because my freshman and my sophomore are friends, and they share friend group, and, they go to the same parties, and like, they have other friends too, but it's pretty great when they're like, "Oh, they're going to play poker at a friend's house tonight," and it's like good group of kids, but also like it's great because like they're going
There's
together as
there
brother and
yeah.
sister. Yeah,
That's so cool. Yeah, I think it is such a it's a trade-off decision, right? Where you're like, okay, if you're having them all together, it's crazy, to
yeah,
have like multiple kids in diapers at the same time. And I can only imagine with 4, just like how many I was telling my husband, I'm like, I physically feel like an octopus these days, like especially while I'm
yeah,
driving,
yeah,
which is terrifying to the world, but I swear I'm really attentive. But it's like you're giving someone a snack, you're doing all these things, you're turning a blinker, but I can only imagine with 4 kids, how was that for you? I mean, physically, I think bearing 4 children is a lot, 4 pregnancies is a lot. but then also, raising your kids. How did you manage that? Did you have help? Was your husband involved? How was
Yeah.
their young years?
So at different times, I had help. When my youngest was almost 3 was when I first got help, and then family's close, so they were really good because in a pinch, like, if I needed say someone fell down and, like, I had to go to the pediatrician, like, I could call a family member and they would come and stay with the other kids while I, got the bleeding under control. Not always, but, like, I can't discount that because I know some people have 0 help and they live far from their families, and, like, it was nice to know that if I really needed somebody in a pinch, like, that someone would be available. And my husband is very, very helpful and hands-on too. And then, when my youngest was 3, I needed some help then just because, I needed to, like, stick to preschool pickup and drop-offs. Like, they were so crazy and working, I couldn't make it all work. So I had a little bit of help in the afternoons just to kind of, like, get people to their sports and things like that. On and off, we would have people kind of in the afternoons to help us, until 2 years ago. 3 years ago? 3 years ago. That was life-saving, and it's pretty cute because, like, the kids have different memories of, like, fun things that they did with the different, like, 20-something women.
Yeah, so nice. So you are so civically involved now. Can you tell us a little bit about, which one of these obligations you kind of picked up first and how, you just kept adding these different roles and your school board involvement. So you're running your business. How did you start getting involved in your community?
Well, when my daughter was 2, so a couple of things happened. When my daughter was born, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm gonna get involved with the Chalk Glass Slipper Guild," and I hadn't done anything philanthropy-wise in a couple of years other than, like, mission trips to Mexico here and there. She's like, "It's really low time commitment. It's a great way to meet other young moms. You should come." So I went along with her and got really involved in that for about 5 years, and then my mother-in-law is one of the founding members of Pretend City Children's Museum, and she'd been on the board, and then she's like, "All right, I'm going off the board. Michelle, you've got young kids. We are the first ones of Brady's siblings to have kids. So you should get on the board at the museum and help." So I was like, okay. And my kids loved it there. So I got involved there. And doing stuff with early childhood and hospitals was just, it was plenty. You have so few hours in the day, but those were good because they were things that either were flexible or they worked to bring my children along with me, like to pretend. My youngest, when he's been going to Pretend City board meetings since he was born. So now if I have to go to a board meeting and he comes, like, for any organization, I mean, he's 12 now, so he should be able to, but, like, his whole life, he would just come and bring a book or sit and just, like, and listen. And I think the key has been bringing the kids along with me to these things and not making it the thing that I go do by myself. Because a lot of the lessons that you'd want to teach your kids, like, I don't have to, like, especially teach because they got to see, the importance of helping people and hear other stories about people who are having a hard time and hearing how the work that, that people can help in small ways. I think that's the biggest thing. And then when they went to school, I got involved with the PTA a little bit because I went to private school and was homeschooled. So and I didn't know a lot about the public school system. So I really wanted to make sure that, like, I was aware of what was going on and was super involved as much as I could. And again, that was the kind of thing where, like, if I had to bring a younger kid along with me for an hour to do an activity, it was, like, perfectly acceptable to do so. A couple of years, my youngest was about to go to kindergarten, and I was looking ahead and was excited with all the time I was going to have relatively because they would all be in school and I could just work a whole day and not have to have help to get it done. Because I generally try to work for my job, like, I'll start at 5 in the morning and try to be done by, like, 2 so that I can be with the kids. But I went to a meeting of Orange County nonprofits and the school district was there, and I was there because of the Children's Museum. And I just saw a lot of people who had really great nonprofits and community organizations and really wanted to help the public schools in things that they were lacking. And they didn't know how to work together. The community organizations didn't know how to get involved with the school district. And at that time, the culture of the school district was a lot different than it is now, which was very much like in-house, closed off, like, we'll do it ourselves. We don't need the help. So I looked at that. And probably my biggest skill is that I'm a good connector. I'm really good at connecting people to whatever they need. And so I thought, well, I'll think about it. And then maybe I should get involved on the school board. And then the seat became open because the existing school board trustee retired. And so I really had to think long and hard, like, is this what I want to do, like with my time? Because I never want to take on an obligation that is an obligation that isn't something that I find to be like a joyful work, you know? So that is how I ended up running for school board. And then I won. And then it was a great example of being in the right place at the right time because COVID happened and nobody on the school board had kids in the schools. And it was just, we were able to open a lot earlier than a lot of other school districts. One of the earliest in Orange County, if not, I think maybe the second earliest. But a lot of that was just being able to share what it actually looked like from the lens of a parent and kids, because I think that people say only parents should be on the school board. And I tend to disagree because there's so many things to go to. It's nice to have a mix of people who have recently sent their kids all the way through. They have a different lens, or people who are very involved in nonprofits. I think you need a blend of people, but I think having at least a majority of parents is very, very important. And that just didn't exist. And so being able to to show parents, because now we have 4 parents on the school board out of 0 5 years ago. But I think it's really important to show parents that you can do it. It's not just something that is for other people. I think you always have to sometimes you have to see other people doing it to know that that's a job that you can do too. And I think that that was great because parents are like, okay, she's a working mom. She can make it work. I can make it work too. And also just to provide this perspective of how damaging the COVID policies were on kids and learning and mental health.
Yeah. I love that point that you made about, like, sometimes you have to see someone like you doing something to know that, you can do it too. It's really like the foundation of our whole mission at Meet Bridget is for young women to really intimately feel connected and see someone kind of taking steps or someone that's like them. Like this girl when she was young, oh, I relate to that piece of her childhood or her family life.
Yeah.
And look at her now. Like if she could do that coming from where she started, maybe that's something I could do. I think there's so much truth to that, that it really is something that opens up pathways for people. But this is so interesting. It seems like you really just intuitively added, these different involvements based on, what was relevant to your life at home, but also what felt genuine to you and what really sparked joy too, which I think is such a beautiful lens to look at the things that you're getting involved in. Is like, can I do this joyfully and does it mean something to me? And that it's really
Yeah.
possible to find work based on that filter. I think sometimes we think that, work is work. And there are, even I'm sure, in like the most amazing parts of your jobs, there are parts that are not glamorous at all, but to be able to pursue the things you're getting involved in from that stance is really special.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some things that are so, so boring. And you're like, I'd rather not do this piece of it, but
Yeah.
it's fine because it contributes to the overall mission of of why you're doing it. Just like doing the dishes. No one wants to do the dishes, but they have to get done. And you have a nice house. So that's how I
Totally.
look at it.
There you go. Well, we love to also focus on obstacles, insecurities, especially during kind of like teenage years and young adulthood too. As you've navigated this path, have there been things or moments along your journey that, were formative in the sense that they were difficult for you and you had to like work through them, or recurring, insecurities or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a dancer, body image was a big thing, and trying to decide when I switched from ballet to soccer, I remember so clearly thinking like, okay, now it's okay to look strong,
Yeah.
because as a dancer, you're just so focused on being thin.
Yeah.
Um, I was just lucky in that I remember in auditioning for this role in my ballet company, and I got it. And I'd worked really hard to get it. I was really happy to get it. And the lead who they typically picked, unfortunately, was in the hospital because of an eating disorder. And so she wasn't available. So I got picked. But then she got out of the hospital and was available to dance again. So they're like, sorry, we're casting her because she has more of the look that we're going for.
Oh my gosh.
Um, yeah. And
Big
I just remember
message.
kind of going, yeah, I went, you know what? I'm not going to do that to myself. And
Yeah.
if I don't get roles for that reason, so what, but I would definitely, and definitely had to be like a conscious decision, I guess, on my part to go, like, how bad do you want this role? That are you willing starve yourself in order to get it. And I just thankfully didn't go down that path, but it was like very mentally challenging for a long time to just kind of go like, no, you made the right choice. Like, and so I think teenager girls in general struggle with body image. And I think
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for how dance has changed in so many ways. Like my daughter did American Ballet Theater when she was younger. And there's such a focus on like strength and like grace, but not like an unhealthy look, I guess. But I think that was like a huge one.
Yeah.
And then I think probably another one is growing up being the only woman in girl in the room for a lot of things
Yeah.
because I've been in a lot of male dominated industries and computer science definitely is was an example. I remember I had to there was a study group on Friday nights in college that I wanted to go to, and they're like, "Oh, like, no, sorry, whatever." And, like, "Well, let me know when you're meeting," and they would never let me know. So once I figured out when they were meeting, which was Fridays at 6, I would show up on Fridays at 6 with some chocolate chip cookies at the library and be like, "Here, do you want some cookies?" Like, and then I'd sit down and, like but I had to, like, you know, force that to happen and, be brave enough to, like, face that rejection of like, "Okay, thank you, thanks." And so, I think that's another one, like,
Yeah.
too, like, you wanna see somebody like you doing the things you wanna do, and you can't always you just gotta, like, sometimes put it aside and just go, I'm here how I am." So, yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think that's such a powerful message too, because I feel like, and I felt this when I was in finance for a little while. There's a temptation to be like, okay, if I'm going to try to do something that feels male dominated, I should dampen down. I remember like when I was choosing my suits, because I had been modeling prior to that time, I was like, I can't wear pink. I can't wear anything feminine.
Right.
I can't wear my hair. My hair naturally is kind of curly, but I was like, can't wear it like natural because it looks too sexy, or like I was like, everything
Yeah.
I need to just it's blues or reds or blacks.
Yeah.
Um, which also it's like, okay, if you're trying to get in the door, there's nothing wrong with wanting to kind of take a certain approach. But I also think there's something to being like, I'm here. I'm the only one, but like that also means that I'm bringing a different perspective to the table, and that makes me that much more
Yeah.
necessary. There are studies, countless studies now actually about the profitability of businesses, and those with female influence at the top are more profitable too. So it's not something that's based in like, I hope there's a reason why I should be here. It's like, no, you absolutely are necessary in every room. So just showing up and being like, I'm here exactly as I am, I think is great and influential for people that, are coming
Yeah.
in your footsteps. So great.
Yeah. But, yeah, it takes being brave to kinda just go in and, like, figure out how to do it and then figure out how to do it as yourself.
And I think that it's like if you stick with it long enough, you realize like, oh, it's actually an advantage to have
Yeah.
this experience or to bring, oh, you've been a mother. And I think that like being able to run the business of a family is a brilliant perspective for any other company too. That it's like whatever
Yep.
experience that you've had is something unique that you can bring to the table. Absolutely. So, well, thanks for saying that too. I feel I'm watching our time. I know you are a mother of 4 and very busy. So I'd love to kind of go into we like to close our interviews out with like a fast 5 little questions. And then we always end with the same final question. So if you
Okay.
are ready for that, I will dive into those. Number 1, so, as being part of the school board, what do you kinda see as, like, what's coming down the pipeline for education? What's changing in that world?
I think AI is kind of gonna be like the internet was. It's gonna change the way people learn. I think it's a really positive tool. I think to give teachers the ability to help design lesson plans. In a perfect world, if we could do education perfectly, you'd have like one to one, a teacher to a student who designed their whole lesson plan and that was their whole job to help that student nurture. But even in homeschool, that's not particularly like that's the closest that you can get to that, I think, and that's not always even possible because people have multiple children. AI helps with that because it can take like a lesson plan and tailor it to student skills and figure out where a student needs extra help and focus on those things. I think what we're going to see too is more of a return, and this is not in the near future, but probably within the next 10 years, we're going to see more of a return in education of things like welding and hands-on tactile type things and people moving a little bit slower because people are applying to colleges and it's so full and it's so competitive. And people, I think, are kind of looking around and going, okay, like this school that I wouldn't have considered as a school before, now it's a college and I will go there. But they're also focused more on doing things that they're interested in doing with that college degree other than just going to college. So I think a lot of we're seeing a huge, huge increase with our career technical education side. And it's not replacing college, but it's adding on to it. So we have a ton of people who go through our skilled nursing as high school students. They come out as nurses aides. And then sometimes they go into medicine and sometimes they go into a completely different career and use those nurses aid skills in medical sales or in order to pay for college and maybe they're writers and editors and journalists and those sorts of things. We've lost the focus of needing those additional skills that are not necessarily academic. And I think kids are pushing for it. And I also see a lot of funding coming towards that. So I think that AI and probably career technical education are the things that are going to look the most different if we, look ahead 10 years.
Awesome. I love that perspective. Number 2, do you have a morning routine?
I do. I like to get up and I've recently stopped drinking coffee for the most part in the morning. So I'll do hot water and bone broth and matcha. And a little shout out to my husband who puts them together for me most days at 5 in the morning. So I appreciate that. And then I'll do like my skincare routine and then I'll do like a rolling out kind of like routine, and then I'll go for a walk. I'll walk the dog, or if I have time, I'll walk longer than that. And then in a perfect world, if I can do that the next step of the routine, sometimes it's not every day, but I try to do as much as I can. I always do my meditation and then I like to write in my journal for like 3 pages or something like that, just to get that out. The writing usually doesn't happen every day, but all the other stuff is, if I don't do those things, like I'm really sad by 10 a.m. because I just don't have the energy and focus that I need.
It sounds like you really have to be committed to that to get those things done and wake up that much earlier to make sure you set that stage for yourself. Seems like, wait, she's already so busy or she has 4 kids. Like, I don't have time for this extra, I don't have time to wake up earlier or make this happen for myself. But so many people that are like you and that they're managing a lot have in common that they have very religiously protected,
Yeah.
starting time or some kind of home base where it's like, first I gotta check in with me and get my head right and set up my day for success before they're then pulled in a million different directions. So I love getting that window.
I had to learn that because I think what you do instead is it seems like a lot of time, but then instead you still use that time throughout. You use probably more time throughout the day being like resentful or
Yeah.
distracted or just, like you're actually giving yourself more time by making sure that you're in a good place.
Yeah. I feel like on days when I make that time for myself. It's not always in the morning with the young ones because it's sometimes the morning starts earlier than I can
Yeah.
plan, but just like carving that time out, then I find myself less distracted or looking for kind of escape from the busyness of the rest of the day by scrolling Instagram or whatever it is that where it's like I see those actions in myself more as like a craving escape moment where it's like
Yeah.
I have the time for myself to like think and move my body or whatever it takes to kind of get me to feel plugged in, then I don't really crave those distractions as much throughout the day.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Number 3, so obviously you have a big, amazing family. What's your go-to for like family time? If you're like, I'm ready, we want to have some family time, what do you guys like to do?
We like to play board games and we also like to play music together. So I play the piano, but my daughter plays the piano and my son plays the piano. And then one of my sons plays the bass and my other son plays the trumpet. My dad gave us his old drum set, so which my husband hates, but it makes for pretty fun. Sometimes like on a weeknight, if everyone has practiced their instruments or they have them out, like we'll have like a little jam session and it's like it alternates of like 10 seconds of like really cool jazz and then another 10 seconds of like, oh my gosh, this is really like loud and awful. But it's so fun
Yes.
because like to watch them play together. So and then I'll usually just like sit there and like watch them do that, but I'll get them started on it. And we like to play poker as a family. We like to watch movies.
I love it. I like visualizing that, and the music is such a cool thing to do together. Number 4, You're in the running for city council. What is your mission there? Why are you doing it? And what's kind of the platform you're standing on?
Well, I think the thing that I have learned a lot about being on the school board and what made me want to run for city council is there's so many more families in our community that suffer from homelessness than we would think. It doesn't look like families on the street because that's not generally what it looks like. It looks like people in apartments, I'm sorry, in hotels who are there for, 2, 3 nights and then they have to be in another place, or people living in their car, families living in their cars. There's a lot of you know, a lot more than you'd think in our local area. I think I learned a lot of lessons with how we've helped homeless families in our school district, and I'd love to help apply that to our city. I think homelessness is just a huge problem, and I think there's a lot of community resources that we could partner with as a city that would help. And I think there's maybe I know that they tried a lot with policy changes too. So my focus would be to work with I would like call it like the second and third tier homelessness, people who are out of work, people who have families, people who are having mental health issues and need help in those places. I would say there's some people who are chronically homeless and they prefer to be on the street, and that is like a real problem, and that's a different solution. But I think for the other 2/3 of people suffering the reasons that they come to homelessness, that's something that I understand. It's come to understand better and pretty well through being on the school board, and I'd love to help with that. And then I also think, as I've raised my kids here and I've seen a lot of how things work in the community with e-bikes and traffic and stuff like that, I think there's a lot of things we can do with that. And those are kind of the things that prompted me to get interested. But more and more with the way the state budget is looking, I want to focus on safety, because funding our police and just being really great partners with our police is going to be so essential, because we're not getting that support from the state. So to keep our community safe really requires supporting our police officers. And lastly, I would say that part of my platform is just the harbor. We're such a water family. Like there's someone in my family is either in the harbor or in the ocean at least 3 times a week. Like we're just always in the water. The harbor is so important and so special, and protecting that and preserving it and just making it something that is beautiful and safe and accessible to people, I think is also really important.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
exciting. And for number 5, when you feel stuck in a rut, overwhelmed, do you have any like go-to techniques or things that you try when you just need a reset?
Yeah. So it can vary. My favorite one is I found this what's called like a reset meditation, and it's 11 minutes, and it's just you lay on your back and you put your knees up and you like breathe through things and you think about like letting the whatever negative stuff kind of just like go and dissolve. And then you think about taking, the joy that you have and kind of like absorbing all of the negative stuff. I love that because I use it with my kids too when they get overwhelmed, or like they don't want to go to school, or just like something is going on and they're really overwhelmed. I'll have them do that. And I think probably one of the best things I've found to kind of reset your day. And another thing I really like to do is go to like a coffee shop and get like a coffee or a matcha. And then probably the last thing that I'll do if none of that works, I'll go for a walk, and that usually will handle it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I'm gonna have to ask you to text me that link to that meditation,
Yeah.
include it in our show notes. I think I'd like to do it myself and would like to share
Yeah.
it with our audience. Well, our final question that we like to ask is always the same one. What was a quality that you had as a child or teenager that maybe you didn't appreciate back then, but looking back, you are proud of now?
My family is very quiet growing up. And I was always kind of the loudmouth, which I think people would think is funny because I'm actually very soft spoken. And it was a really hard thing to be that way in like junior high. But like I have almost like a pathological inability to be quiet when something is wrong, or to go along with something that is wrong. Like I can't do it, and I'll have to like speak up about it. It's kind of embarrassing. I remember we were in church and it was like my mom shares a story. I think it was probably like 3 or 4, and, they were doing a collection for, like, the missions, just like there was a hurricane or something terrible like that, and I stood up and I said, "Give your money to Jesus." I was like, "Oh my gosh." Looking back, it's, like, so embarrassing. And then there was another time in junior high where it sort of became like this rite of initiation. It was all my same friends, and new kids came, and they're like, "All right, well, you want to be part of the friend group, you have to repeat this sentence." And it was like filled with bad words and whatever. And I was like, that is stupid.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say a bunch of bad words. I'm not going to do that. They're like, well, you can't be in our friend group. And that was that. And we weren't friends anymore for
Yeah.
like the rest of the year. And I just at that time was like, why can't you just go along, Michelle? Why can't you just like do it? But like I couldn't. Now it's great because when in life, it's like I think as you get older, that's something that is really hard to cultivate and to just to trust that part of myself and just say like if it feels wrong, you just yeah, just don't do it. I can't do it. So
Yeah.
caused me like some problems, but it's I think got me where I am.
Yeah. It sounds like you've always had a really strong gut instinct and thankfully like a voice to, make it known and to do something about it. So, Michelle, thank you so much. This has been such a treat to hear about your story, where you've been and where you're going and where you're taking our community. So, thank you for being on and I'm looking forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a delight to be here. Thank you.